Are Hindus polytheists? Many Christians seem to think so, and in a certain sense that's understandable. From the outside looking in, they see so many varieties of the forms of God. Some with the head of an elephant, some shaped like swans, some with blue skin or green skin. And with all of this variety, it can be very easy to think that Hindus are in fact worshipping many discrete gods. But let's look at what the actual Hindu scriptures say about this. Now, it's true that it's difficult to make generalizations about Hinduism since the term Hindu is a vast umbrella that encompasses many different traditions, beliefs, and philosophies. Nevertheless, most of these traditions do share some important similarities. Within the Vedanta tradition lies the vast corpus of Vedic literatures. So let's look at what those literatures actually say about God to try and answer this question. The Ishopanishad is one of the most important and oldest texts of Hindu philosophy. It begins like this: Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. This means the Godhead is perfect and complete, and because of that perfection and completeness, all emanations from Him, such as the phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as complete wholes. Whatever is produced of the complete whole is also complete in itself. Because He is the complete whole, even though so many complete units emanate from Him, He remains the complete balance. This is a prime mover. This is an original being. This is that from which everything around us emanated. Okay, let's look at the 5th verse from the Ishopanishad. It says, Tad jati tanai jati, tad dhore tad vyantike, tadantar asya sarvasya, tadu sarvasyasya bhayataha. This says, the Supreme Lord walks and does not walk. He is far away, but He is very near as well. He is within everything, and yet He is outside of everything. Again, we see the emphasis here on one origin, on one all-powerful Lord from which everything emanates. And we're also getting a clue as to His transcendental nature here. He's very near, but also very far away. He walks and does not walk. He's within everything, and yet outside of everything. So He's both immanent and transcendent in this view. This is not some mere storm god that we offer sacrifices to in order to propitiate the rains and protect ourselves from floods. This image of God is of a both immanent and transcendent being, one single source, not a multitude of gods. Okay, from here, let's turn to perhaps the most famous Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 15, text 18 says, Yasmaksharam atitoham aksharada pichotamaha Attismi loke vedecha pratita purushottamaha. Okay, this is the Lord Himself speaking. He says, because I am transcendental, both beyond the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that supreme person. This is not a god of superstition. This is not a pagan god. This, again, is pointing toward one supreme Lord, something that's very familiar from the Christian point of view, in fact. So much like Christians, many Hindus, particularly within Vaishnava sects, tend to see the Lord as not only the origin of all, not only as transcendent and immanent, but as He Himself says here, as a person. This is a personal God with whom we can interact. And indeed, in Bhagavad Gita chapter 10, verse 8, Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matta sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvataha. This means, I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise, who perfectly know this, engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. So just like our Abrahamic counterparts, Hindus view God as the source of everything, as a personal God, and as a God that is to be worshipped and loved. Okay, moving on to our third and final Shastra, or scripture here. We're going to be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, verse 33. It says, Ahameva samevagre nanyad yat sadasat param pashtadaham yadeta cha yova shishyeta sosmyaham. The meaning is, this is God Himself speaking. He says, it is I, the personality of Godhead, who was existing before the creation when there was nothing but myself. Nor was there the material nature, the cause of this creation. That which you see now is also I, the personality of Godhead. And after annihilation, that which remains will also be I, the personality of Godhead. He doesn't say anything about many gods. He says, I alone existed before the creation, and I alone will exist after the destruction. So the great majority of Hindu textual evidence suggests that the God that we worship is that one all-powerful God, that same conceptual God that Christians and Muslims worship as well. But then the question might be asked, okay, why so many forms of God? There's so many images that Hindus say are God. Actually, Hindus don't just practice any kind of monotheism. We practice what's called polymorphic monotheism. This kind of monotheism suggests that the Lord is one, but appears in many forms. And this makes sense. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna that he reciprocates with his devotees perfectly as they reciprocate with him. That means the one God appears to many people in many different ways according to their inclinations and desires. So for a Hindu, God might appear as Krishna or Ram. To a Christian, they might appear as the Christ. Each of us has a particular swabhav, or nature, and the Lord appears to us in ways that are appealing and will bring us down the path of righteousness and godliness. This attitude is one of the reasons why Hinduism is famous for its tolerance. Christians may say that the God of the Bible is the only form of God that one can approach, and that Jesus Christ is the only way to attain the divine. But if that were true, why would God be so cruel as to exclude people who existed before the birth of Christ, or who are in remote locations and may never have heard of Christianity? I know Christian apologists have answers to these objections, but I've never heard one that's convincing for me. Far more likely, it seems to me, that the Lord is a universal principle that appears to each people in different ways just to suit their personalities and needs. And so Christians may say that Hindus are on a demonic path, that they're eventually going to end up in hell. But what Hindus say is that the real mark of a legitimate spiritual or religious path is what it teaches. Does it teach compassion, goodness, and most important of all, does it teach selfless love of God? If a religion teaches those things, then it's considered legitimate by Hindus. Therefore, Christianity is not a false religion from the point of view of Hinduism. It's a legitimate religion because it's trying to bring people closer to pure love of God. And so if somebody has a particular inclination or mood that brings them toward Christianity, so much the better. That's legitimate. And indeed, if someone has a mood that brings them toward Hinduism, that's okay to do. We're all free to practice religion in the way that brings us to God the closest and fastest. So the next time you hear somebody say that Hindus are polytheists, you'll know that that's not the case. Hindus believe in one God, one original person, and that person, from the Hindu perspective, is the same as the God that the Christians worship, that the Muslims worship, and so on. Okay, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you've got a question or a comment, put it down in the comments below and I'll answer it in a video like this. Jai Shri Radhe.